Hi there, my name is Mary Kilolea. Welcome to the To Be Bolder podcast, providing career insights for the next generation of women in business and tech. To Be Bolder was created out of my love for technology and marketing, my desire to bring together like-minded women, and my hope to be a great role model and source of inspiration for my two girls and other young women like you, encouraging you guys to show up and to be bolder and to know that anything you guys dream of, it's totally possible. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. Hi, thanks for joining. Today, I'm excited to have with us a wonderful, successful woman. Tracy Nolan is a Fortune 100 executive who's made bold career moves in industries not always known for being welcoming to women at the top. She's held leadership roles at Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, and now Humana. And throughout her journey, she's stayed grounded in her values while driving massive transformation and mentoring the next generation of female leaders. Today's conversation, she is going to share how she found her voice, what it really takes to lead through complexity and change, and why her latest mission and passion project of lifting as you climb is more than just a motto. Tracy, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited for our conversation.
Thank you for having me, Mary. I'm excited to be here today.
All right. So we always start this off with a look back on where you started and kind of a little bit at a high level, your journey here to give people kind of that kind of 500-foot view of the career path.
So, Mary, I'm going to take you way back, but I promise I won't go on for that long. So, I always seemed to be someone that was always kind of challenging the status quo or wanting to put myself in kind of uncomfort zone. So, back in college, I went to an engineering school. Ratio was 6 men to every 1 woman. And I went there not to be an engineer, but I went there because I wanted to put myself I wanted to go to the best school I got into from an academic perspective, but I also wanted to put myself in a situation that would not be super comfortable to see how I would thrive. And so I've always been kind of one of those that is challenging the status quo, putting myself into different situations. Right out of college, I was like most people, I didn't get a job right away. So I had to figure out how to go through interviews with a college wardrobe. So I said, hey, let's go work in retail. So I started working in retail part-time to get these clothes to go to this wonderful interview for this job in marketing. And I ended up staying in retail because I really loved the idea of how I could learn about how not only to sell, but how do I make women feel super confident in the clothing that they had for work. I started kind of my own shopping, mystery shopping business for them. I'd help them pick out wardrobes and things like that. And then, I got this crazy call one day to go and work in telecom and into telecommunications back in the day when wireless phones were big and clunky and the StarTAC was just coming out and you couldn't clear it here. And my whole family thought I was crazy because I was doing so well in the retailing space. Like, why would you ever go to this telecommunications company when you got all this going on? And took a leap because I saw the vision of where I thought wireless was going to go to instead of calling places, we were going to call people. And that sounded super interesting. So I spent many years in wireless and, going up the ranks it was Frontier Cellular that became Bell Atlantic Mobile that became Verizon. When I left there, I was like, hey, I did a little startup turnaround scenario where they were starting up a wireless business and then got into business development, spent some time actually over in Asia and Korea negotiating contracts, which was another time that I learned like, hey, I was a woman in an area where they didn't really like to negotiate with women, and it was technical. So they didn't, they'd always go to the engineer versus me for negotiations. But that was super interesting. And then I had an opportunity to go work for Cox, and I was like, hey, I can get all around telecommunications, not just not wireless and local long distance and voice over IP, which I got through that startup, but now I could get cable and then I'd be full rounded. So I spent some time at cable, really redoing the whole customer experience piece in sales. And from there, I did a couple other things, got back into wireless for a while and led through that unbelievable merger during COVID. And got a call one day about a job going into to Humana into healthcare, and kind of full circle. My dad was in healthcare and worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield, so it was like a full circle call back to
Mhm.
like my roots to get back into what I do today. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell and where I've come. But I've always put myself in what I call in comfort zones and
Mm.
challenged myself and not been afraid to step out and try and realize that the worst thing you could do is not try. So that's really what has skyrocketed what I've done and where I've gone.
What a fascinating journey. What do you think makes you so good at trusting your instincts?
Um, it's not easy because it's a lot of times easier to stay where you
Mm.
are. And I remember someone once saying to me, "Hey, you got a incredible job, you've got incredible title with an incredible company. You're probably never going to have another opportunity as this. Just keep your head down and keep going." And that is what makes, like that sounds good because it's stable, but I think I realized that nothing is ever really stable.
Mm.
And so what allows me is like, I just have this belief that, um, it's okay to try. I guess I've come to grips with myself that it's okay to try. And what's the worst that's going to happen? My mom used to say to me all the time, this too shall pass, and that 99% of what you worry about or you think isn't going to happen won't happen. So I think it's just a belief in myself that, you know what, as long as I've tried, I may not always hit an A, get an A in a
Mm.
report card, but it's better to get a B or a C plus than not to try. So I think that's kind of just installed in how I work.
Um, I love that. It's very admirable. A lot of women wait to feel fully qualified before they take on a role. In your career, it sounds like, you put your foot into something, maybe not knowing everything that you were getting into. What advice do you have for women who feel like they need to wait until they check all the boxes?
I think they don't even wait. Sometimes they don't even realize what their potential is, right? And I many times, I have as I say, I have that instinct, but I also am one that like wants to do everything perfect. And for women in particular, we feel like we have to know it all, right? To take that opportunity. And that is probably one of the things that can hold you back the very most. And I would say that, you know what, it's, you are, I wish I could just give everybody kind of like confidence enough to say, try it because you probably can do it much more than you can. And I have a couple mentors. I have a Ron Boylett who was incredible at Frontier Cellular, who I'd taken on a new role. He put me in a role I didn't even think I could handle. I was like, holy crap, he's asking me, and it was running all of sales, and I was fairly young, and he's like, hey, you got it. And then the next thing I know, he's like, 10 days later, we have to do an interview, or you got to go in and give your strategic plan to the new CEO. And it was 10 days after I started. I'm like, Ron, I don't know anything about, like, I haven't had a chance to do it. He's like, go ahead and just put together what you think. And I asked him to look at the presentation, Mary. I was like, can you help me? Can you do it? And he's like, no. And he would not help me with any of it. And he didn't even want to look at it before we walked in. And I thought, wow, he's crazy. Like this is going to reflect on him. Oh my gosh, there's no way I'm not going to do well at that. I put it together, and what I learned was he had more faith in me than I
Mhm.
had in myself. And the thing I'd say to most women is, um, trust in yourself. You're better than you're giving yourself credit to. And what's the worst that's going to happen? Okay, maybe you get a C plus. Okay, that's better than not even having that opportunity. You don't have to wait till you're A
Mm.
plus ready. And most of us do. And I so proud of a couple women that I mean, there's so many women that I've had this opportunity to have an impact on. I think of one woman in particular who was a single mother. She had two, she's raising two young kids and she was working so hard. And I gave her an opportunity to step up into a role. And she was like, I don't think I can do it. I'm like, oh, you can do it and you can do so much more. And she has flourished her career ever since. But again, it was that whole feeling of like, ooh, I can't do it. I'm not ready. I'm not, I don't have all the skill sets. I got to tell you, most men, and there are some women like this too. So it's not just that way, but like there are some that just go out and do it, and you don't have to know everything in a role, right?
Yeah, there's so much value in what you just said. So let's talk about mentorship because I know there's a lot of people out there listening. Easy for you to say you had a mentor. What advice do you have for them on attracting mentors, having a relationship with mentors that is successful and meaningful?
Yeah. So this is a great topic because I didn't even know there was a thing called a sponsorship, which is different than a mentor. And Ron is an example of a sponsor, someone who believed in me more than I believed in myself. And I didn't even know, like, I didn't ask him to be a mentor. He just kind of was there. But one of the best examples I have of what a great mentor could do is I've had a lot of people ask me, hey, will you mentor me? And then I say, yes, we'll get on the phone. And then they'll be like, hi. And it's like, okay, now, like, what are you waiting for me to do? Right. I had one individual to this day who is still a mentor of mine I'm still mentoring him after 7 years, which is rare because I usually want to lift and have them go find someone else. But what's unique about this relationship is the first meeting I had, I was a couple minutes late. We had it 30 minutes. He had a clock. He was watching the time and he's like, okay, this is what I've got. He came with a presentation, and not that it always has to be, wasn't a perfect, it wasn't anything, but it was like, Tracy, here's my goals.
Mm.
Here's what I'm thinking. And he asked me for advice on what he was thinking. And he went through, I want you to know about me. Here's my personal goals. Here's my professional goals. Here's what I'm doing about it. And then he would every time come back and measure to that. But not only did he talk about that, then he would go in and say, Tracy, based on your role and what you're doing, here's one idea that I think could help you in what you do. So he always came with something to give back. And the best example I'll tell you is and then we would go through, and we would do it. But one of the times he came and he said, hey, Tracy, I know here's something about that's happening within your work group that I think you should, that would be a great, way you could enhance engagement and productivity on this item, which was great. But then he said to me, Tracy, I got to ask you a question. You accomplished so much, but do you have your own vision board? And what is your vision for this year? And I went, you know what? I haven't done a vision board in 15 years. I just kind of go with what I do. And he's like, well, it doesn't matter what level you are. You have one life and you have you have a new year starting. Why don't you put together your vision board? And I was like, I got off the phone and I was like, wow, that it was insightful. So, Mary, what I'd say is he gave me back and gave me advice as much as I gave him. And I think that's what's missed in this whole mentorship. We think it's like, hey, you're going to mentor me. So great. And even if they come with like, here's my 3 areas of issues, got to remember that person's giving up time for you. So if you can give them something back, and it could be just a question, it could be like, have you thought about this? Or, hey, I've noticed in your work group or in the industry, this is happening. Here's a great article for you to read.
Mm.
Like, you got to give back. It's not a one-way street.
I love that. So as an executive, you've risen to the top and done really well through, you know, everything that you've done, mergers, acquisitions, leading companies, all the stuff that typically is dominated by males. How have you stuck to being true to yourself, keeping your values, owning your identity, and walking into a room confidently?
It took a while. It was not, it definitely there when I started my career. And also I coming from upstate New York where I had a very prim and proper upbringing, not, just because I had a grandfather who was a
Mm,
minister, and my mom was just, very big in manners and how you did things. And so I used to do things like walk into a meeting and make sure here I am an invite. It's not my meeting, but I'd walk in and I'd go around the room and I'd make sure everybody had drinks. So like, I'd like, hey, do you need a water? Do you like, I was like party. I became like the party planner, and I realized that like I'm a participant. I'm not the host in this meeting. And, I used to go in also, I teach this to women all the time. I used to go in and sit down and like make sure I only took up so much space at the
mm,
table. You watch fellow men, they come in and they spread out and they take over their seats, and they come in, 2 minutes before, a minute before, they're not early. And, at first I was trying to be this like hostess with the mostest because I thought, well, that was the way to entertain, be. And then I decided I'm going to try to do the men thing and take up space and walk in and do it. And what I realized was, I just had to be myself. I didn't have to like study what was the sports games last night so I could talk and be like everyone else. I needed to show up authentically, show up and not be afraid to put my voice. If you're invited to a meeting, you are invited to participate. You're not on the CC list, or, or that like you own it. And I have realized that when tried to not be one way, be the hostess or be like everyone else, but be myself and be authentic, it is okay. And actually it's well perceived. And that is something that is, whether it's a room of, I remember one meeting with Samsung where I was the only woman in a room of 22 men. There are 23 of us in the meeting. And I was like, I'm going to sit in the middle of the room. I'm going to take my space up, and I'm going to make sure that if I have something important, I'm going to ask the questions, or I'm going to give feedback. It's not about being anything other than yourself, and not feeling, because that's the other thing. Sometimes we feel like, oh, we don't want to say anything in this big room, or, oh, oh, I need to say something, just so that I'm seen. And if you can get out of your head all that and just
mm.
be you, you can be so much more authentic, and you can feel so much better about what you're doing, and you'll be taken seriously.
Was there a moment, because I assume that took time and was a gradual process, was there a moment when you go, wow, I'm no longer doing that intention, like that aha moment, like, oh, I got this kind of, like it was just like natural now.
It took a while. It took a while of testing and learning through the process. And then I think it came down to letting go the fear of what would happen if I wasn't perfect, or if I wasn't, I stopped thinking about what others were thinking and thinking more about being the engaged and being part of it, and about the problem. Like a lot of times we go into meetings and we're thinking about how we're being perceived or what we're doing,
Mm,
instead of, I always say, like, I love this is because it's helped me a lot, is when we're in a meeting, we're usually dealing with a problem or something we need to solve. So I like to not think about it as about how I'm being perceived, but I think about it as a puzzle. So I always think of, like, when we're talking in a meeting, like, this is a puzzle on the table, and we're going to figure out how to put it together. together, and it lets all that other clutter about everything else go. And so I think it's that mindset shift of not worrying about perception or how I'm being seen, but more about the problem at hand, which sounds so basic. I would
Mm-hmm.
tell you that I think if you look around the room in most meetings, people, especially in big companies, are thinking about all the other things that are probably not the thing at hand, right?
So true. Oh my gosh. Your leadership style is a combination of strength and grace. What have you learned about balancing those two forces, and how do you model that for your teams?
Again, it's through being authentic and real and not trying to be something that I'm not, because, that's the other thing is growing up to your point in around, in male dominated industries for so long. Healthcare is not. So I'd say this is prior to Humana, but I would say that it was, always trying to like, is being soft considered, a good or, bad, and a lot of times you feel like you have to be dominant. And for me, what I found is caring about people and listening is probably one of the most critical points to a leader.
Mm,
You can still be demanding, and I am like people who work for me will say Tracy's highly demanding. Matter of fact, sometimes I think what she's asking for is kind of like it's pie in the sky, but then we achieve it and we're like, oh my gosh, couldn't believe we did it. Sometimes we don't achieve it, but it's still like we've done better than we thought we could. But grounding that with remembering that everybody like you don't know what's going on in a person's life, and you don't know what's
mm,
going on at home with their families, with their parents, with kids. Like you don't know what else is out there, and just having a personal touch and caring and asking and listening to others is so critically important. So I was not always a good listener. Like I was always like, we got to get this done, well, let's go. But I make myself realize that if I am talking the majority of the meeting, that is not an effective meeting. I
mm,
need to step back. I need to listen, because that's where you really learn what's really going on. And so that's really where my leadership came from, is that I realized showing that I care, remembering that somebody's mother was in the hospital and had surgery, and
mhm,
just reaching out and saying, how's your mom doing 2 weeks later, can mean the world to someone that you even remembered or cared, right? And so, I also realize that most people don't come to work. I'd say 99% of the people don't come to work to do a bad job. So if
mhm,
something isn't going well, it's probably because either the expectations weren't set and weren't aligned, the communication was off, or it's a skills issue. And all those things can be solved, right? And I'm sure most people don't want to feel like they're having a bad day every day. So help them figure out what it is. And maybe it's that they're in the wrong role, and there's nothing, having those hard conversations are actually very helpful to people versus ignoring it and having both be miserable in it. So caring goes a long way. And, it's just open and honest and realizing people aren't coming to work to do something wrong.
I wish more leaders thought like that, because there's so much truth in that. So you're full circle running Amana, back at Amana. Tell us about your role and responsibilities, and
At
what you
human.
love so much about your current position.
So first of all, my husband and family members would say if Tracy could have two careers, she would have been a nurse, a doctor,
Mm,
or just volunteer at a hospital where she was, when my parents were elderly, they had me late in life. So it was early for me that my parents went through a lot of health issues and since passed. I would adopt Mary, I'd adopt the floor. I would see people there that didn't have their parent, like elderly people who didn't have any relatives there, or people whose parents had to go work. And I literally would adopt the floor. I would do things till the nurses would tell me I couldn't do for the patients on the floor. Like I care deeply for people. I actually am really interested in just healthcare and medicine and all that. So when this opportunity for to go work at Humana and take the skill sets that I've learned throughout my career, and I run really the sales and operations for Humana, which is for 65 plus, healthcare. It is fascinating to me to be back, and it just feels right to the core of who I am to be able to bring the leadership and what I've done and hopefully make the difference in how people understand what their healthcare, insurance needs are, and make sure that we're helping build better health outcomes for our members. So it's just really full circle. And what I would also say is this is, a company that has a very big mix of male and females. And the females in this organization leadership, they all support each other, which is the first organization I've ever worked for where there's really not this whole feel of like there can only be one woman that is, like we're all like big support group. And it's just a really incredible place that's allowed me to bring my skill set into something that is really at the heart of who I am.
That's beautiful. And I'm going through that. I'm in that sandwich generation where I've got my younger kids and then my aging parents. It's such a overwhelming concern for the children who are caring for their parents or helping them advocate for themselves.
It's hard. I remember seeing this tough guy who was a CFO at one of our companies. And I was like, I used to literally like almost shake as I'd have to go ask him for money. And I was really early in my career because I was like, I'd have to go through an ROI with him. Oh my gosh, this is going to be miserable. And one day I went in and he was like, not anything I could ever expect. He was so soft and he was so like he had just told me his mom was going through some major medical problems and it really hit me like, oh my gosh, you know, aging parents, aging care, and people are, to your point, living longer, but they're still having medical issues as they are. That whole piece, if I could just help impact that in some way to make that easier, that would be very fulfilling.
Uh, you've also launched a platform focused on helping leaders. It's called Lift as They Climb. Tell us more about that mission and your passion around that.
Yeah, so I, have spent so many years completely engrossed in my day-to-day business that I haven't really had the opportunity to do what also is important to me. And now have the ability and time where I really want, first of all, I'd love every woman leader to look down and help other women leaders lift as they climb to us to, as I said, what I've seen throughout my years is that women don't help women out. Most of my mentors have been male mentors, through the years. And so I think there's a real space to be able to help others. And, for me, if I can be remembered as someone in somebody's career, like I mentioned Ron Boylett, like if I can help influence and help others in some way by giving a little piece of advice that they use in their career, that fulfills my soul. So this whole thing is really more about, I do some mentoring circles. This is not a for-profit by any means. This is my way of helping give back. And so if I can, through my experience, share some of what I've done that can help others, that's what it's all about.
You're also on the board of Dress for Success Worldwide and numerous other boards throughout your career. I know I've been curious, and maybe you can unlock the secret behind it. How has being on a board elevated your career? What has it helped? and who would
So,
you recommend it?
one of the things that's super important. So I do have to just give a shout out for how I got on Dress for Success, because I think this is super interesting. As I mentioned, I started in retailing. So I
Mm,
have watched Dress for Success, always been super interesting because originally it was all about clothing to help other women gain, gain positions to be able to help them be able to be self-sufficient and raise their families. So like that's how it all started. But now it's gone much beyond that, where they're giving, help, whether it be financial advice or how to help them women start businesses. There's a lot more than just the clothing piece to the business. But Mary, I came to realize that I wanted to get involved in one national or worldwide board. And I made a list, and the first one was Dress for Success. So I said, okay, onto this board. And this is great advice for anybody who's looking for it. Like, make a list of what your passion's about and where you think you can give back. And then start to look through who you're connected to or who you might know that you can connect to. So I literally connected to someone who knew through LinkedIn, knew who the CEO was. Once I got to that person, I said,
mhm.
could you make the introduction? And I went through like 6 months of literally interviews and everything to get this opportunity for being on Dress for Success Worldwide. And what I find in any board situation is it's great to be connected, and you need to ensure that, like I always say, of course, you have the group that you work in, or the team that works for you. But you also have to make sure you're growing your peers, you're growing, you understand what your customer needs. And also what's important to your boss and how you can help him succeed and your whole organization. But the external piece of being connected to others outside who are in different industries, like the board for Dress for Success has so many interesting people and, board members that I'm always learning from them. And it goes back to continuous learning at every level. I think I'm more curious today, and I'm doing more learning today than I probably did 10, 15 years ago. But like, just being curious and learning from others is really great for boards, and, to what you can gain and what you can also contribute to them.
What is one of the best pieces of business advice, career advice that you've received? And I know that sounded like two questions, but I guess career advice for business growth.
My favorite saying is, you're either moving forwards or backwards. You're never standing still. So the choice is really yours. Do you want to move backwards or do you want to move forwards? And I love that because, time doesn't stand still. Technology doesn't stand still. And I see so many people in the same roles for years, and they're not growing, and they may be doing okay, but at some point something's going to happen and something's going to change. So I always, don't be afraid of the change, because it's either going to come, and it's going to come. I mean, you look at businesses who didn't change, a Kodak, a Xerox, I could go down the list, who struggled, whose stocks were super high, and then, they're either out of business. Blockbuster, another one. So like, I'd say just realize that change is always going to happen, and run into it and realize to move forward. Don't wait. Don't, don't wait, and don't fall backwards.
Where do you see the biggest opportunities, career growth wise, for women today as we are kind of in this enormous time of transformation with AI, the economy downsizing, cuts, new things are being invented that we don't even know, where should people be focusing their learning?
So of course, I do think, learning about AI is super important, but if you're looking for, I think anyone that is understanding how to manage through change and through transformation, because that is not an easy skill set. It sounds a lot easier, and companies are going through so much massive change. They need people who can help them understand how to navigate through a change process. And I think that's one of the things, like, again, one of the things that I've always done is, like, I don't wait till someone comes and says, hey, we need to figure out how to be more efficient and drive more of this. Like, I'm always moving our organization that way so that it doesn't happen to us, that we're making it happen ahead of that, right? So process improvements, managing through change. You can study AI, but AI is is the technology. It's really the transformational piece is where I would get as much information. There's lots of just even reading, like, reading books about it, reading articles. There's so much information out there today.
Fantastic. What does to be bolder mean to you?
I love to be bolder, and why I wanted to be here is because we all need to be bolder and not let that fear hold us back from doing what's important to us. And it took me a while to get there, even knowing you may say, Tracy, you had a pretty successful career. Thank you for saying that. But, I could have been bolder in some situations. Like, just be yourself, and to be bold is really critical to happiness.
Thank you so much for being here. You've shared so much. I appreciate you and everything that you're doing for women.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you for what you're doing, and I appreciate the opportunity. Have a great day today.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the episode today. It was really fun chatting with my guest. If you liked our show, please like it and share it with your friends. If you want to learn what we're up to, please go check out our website at 2bbolder.com. That's the number 2, little b, boulder.com.